Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Friday, April 4th, 2025. Time for yet another show. And this time, a little bit special, a different approach to the end of the week. The president knocked off early. The Fridays are usually the freeform day, Friday and Sunday, when Trump flies down to Florida. Or I guess pretty soon he'll be flying up to New Jersey to play golf for the weekend instead. A big change in weekend operations. But of course, that's his sort of unsupervised time with the press on the plane. I mean, it's more or less unsupervised time with the press when he's doing his signings in the Oval Office, but at least he's staffed there. I mean, he's always got staff around, but I don't know. That sort of seems to be the free-form place where they ask him questions, or he just wings it and says, we're going to bomb Lithuania starting tomorrow, or whatever, just blurts things out. So it's an exciting time for the press. They don't pay a great deal of attention to what it is he's doing, but so he's already done that. So that stuff is already on the record, and we don't have to wait until Friday after the show to find out that happened, and then wait to tell you about it until Monday. Although that's not necessarily top of the charts for today. But I did catch at least two clips of how he spent his commute. One was, and I didn't grab the clips. They're not that important, but you can imagine him describing these things. But one was that he was asked about Signalgate and essentially the progression of it, and how the Inspector General at DOD was now investigating Pete Hegseth's role in this and in sharing classified information on this channel with what turned out to be an unsecure channel. At any rate, and using an app that they really should never have been using for this, no matter whether it was whether they had control over who was in the group or not. And Trump's basic autocratic answer: "Don't ask me about that. I don't want to hear anybody talking about that anymore." So, sort of an interesting approach to take with the media. And of course, you're not hearing very much about that. First Amendment, yada yada. Press ordered to shut up, stop asking about something controversial by the president. But otherwise would normally be top news. Certainly had any Democrat done it. The other thing was he was more freewheeling about, I don't know what the context was in which it came up. I only see him in clips, basically. I'm not following what's going on with him day to day, even though he's supposed to be the leader of the free world. But it's just too mind-numbing to do that. So Aaron Rupert does that for us, apparently. And one of the things he was blabbing about on the plane was, and I might be able to even grab that, but it's not that important that you hear it in his voice, especially since I'll give you his voice. But he displays for the crowd, and maybe it's important to see the clip just so you can see how dumb looking this thing is. What looks like an oversized credit card, and he asks them, "Do you know what this is?" And he has one of the enthusiastic, probably right-wing reporters with him. Oh, I'm sorry, Asen got this one. Okay. Oh, I'm used to crediting Aaron Rupert for the video, but Asen does the other half of our video universe. And let's see. So he's holding up this thing, and it looks like, and like I said, an oversized credit card, and of course it's gold. And when I say it looks like an oversized credit card, I mean, that's about the size of it, but it also still looks like it's just, cardboard or whatever. And, but it's fashioned to look like, maybe it's the tone of gold is like the American Express gold card tone of gold. I would get it. So anyway, and it's got his face on it, and he's, how he loves to, I'm putting my face on something. Make me scowl and look mean. So that's his official portrait, and then he's got that, and it's got a flag motif and a signature motif, and I'm trying to see what else is on there. It's anyway, it's a stupid looking thing. There's an eagle. There's a Statue of Liberty. Just sort of mishmash. It's a Photoshop mess. And he's asking people, "Do you know what this is?" And the enthusiastic press says, "It's a gold card, the Trump card." And I think it actually says, like the Trump card on it or something. I'm trying to, So not really much of a question and answer. Do you know what this is? Well, it says the Trump card on it, and your face is on it. Is it the Trump card? Yes, it is. So he goes ahead and he sort of, kind of. I don't know whether there's more to the clip that I didn't see that, he explains what it is. But do you remember this? This is something that's been talked about from time to time. This is sort of like the hyper, I don't know what, hyper something. Anyway, something, the super steroids enhanced on fentanyl version of an existing program whereby, and the previous most enthusiastic practitioner with these was Jared Kushner in the first term, whereby you could get foreign nationals to invest. I think it was, for a bribery family, it seemed pretty low, like $500,000 or more. If you invested it, I don't really know what counts as an investment, but investing it in the United States somehow, and you would get either automatically receive a green card or move to the front of the line. I don't know what the procedure actually was, but it's unfortunately, it was a legitimate program and it was real. And Jared Kushner was using it essentially to raise money for his projects. Well, if I can get $500,000 at a time for every 2 Chinese nationals I can sign up, that's $1 million right off the top of what I got to raise. So he was very active in pitching these things and selling them, essentially, with the idea being, it will count toward your investment if you invested in me. Anyway, Trump immediately got the idea to up it by a factor of 10 and turn it into $5 million and make it a gold card, not a green card, but a gold card. And it's going to be the Trump card. And I think it actually comes with like automatic citizenship. Like you just, bam, $5 million naturalized citizen. Which, so much for the integrity of the borders and citizenship, and you can't be just born here and get citizenship. You got to give me $5 million. And so it's a huge, crazy scam. I don't know how they're structuring and how it's supposed to work. And they may end up reining him in at some point and saying, well, we don't just get, sir, it can't be citizenship. It can be a green card or it's a kind of visa. We can control that, but I don't know. I'm not even sure. The real kicker of it to me is that he is, making this thing and it's going to be a Trump card and it's gold. But what set me off was as he's telling the reporters about this is interesting. So maybe let me see. I'll play the clip because now I'm forgetting exactly what was in it and what wasn't. But let's see if I can't cue that up. I'm going to have to go and open up Pocket on the big machine. And I can do this because Greg Dworkin is not here today. So I can take my time setting this thing up because otherwise they'd have to be playing him in at this point. By now he'd be ready to talk. So Trump is explaining what's going on. My memory of it is that he tells people, so you get citizenship, it's automatic, at $5 million. And he's, now I can just play it for you. But he's asked who's the first buyer. And if he says in this clip, we know what this card is supposed to be about, but if he says it in the clip, then it makes even less sense. Let's see.
I haven't seen you in a while.
Oh, wow. That's so much.
5 million.
So much airplane noise in this. It's actually kind of hard to hear, but so he's showing it around. It's in the middle of the conversation. So showing it around to people, $5 million, just displaying this card, and he hasn't introduced it yet. But
for $5 million, this could be yours. That was the first of the cards. And you know what that card is?
Gold card.
It's the gold card. The Trump card, gold card.
Who's the first buyer?
Me.
There you go.
Who's the second?
I don't know.
All right. So first of all, it's an awful lot of airplane noise, so it's kind of hard to hear. But the Trump gold card, I think the explanation must be background stuff that we've heard before. This was something that he's been saying he was going to do for a long time, but you know how he is. Showing around, do you know what it is? $5 million. This could be yours. This is one of the first cards. So if it awards citizenship or anything like that, right? Who's the first buyer? Me. You? First of all, I think you're already a citizen. I hope. Well, you know what? I hope you're not. Let's find out now that you're not a citizen. We'll do something about that. I'm sure we'll get right on that. Anyway, who's the first buyer? Me. My guess is that in his addled brain, he might be thinking, well, one, I didn't buy it. I gave it to myself. Two, I made the cards. Maybe they have numbers on them, and card 001 belongs to me. I get it. It's mine as a collector's item. Maybe. That's the thing that makes sense. If you want to sane wash this whole thing. But if you really want to have a good time, well, I'll ask you this. You're avid listeners of the show, as evidenced by the fact that you're doing it right now. Don't try to deny it. How long do you think it's going to be before the cards are out? You already know the answer, don't you? All right. Well, there's nothing like hearing it from the horse's mouth. When is the card coming? Let's see.
But I'm the first buyer. It'll be out in about less than 2 weeks.
Ta-da! Less than 2 weeks. That's right, everybody. I can't believe that he said. I'm really astonished. I don't know whether this is ever going to happen, and maybe they just have too much self-control, and it is too much if this is happening. But if you're a repeat player in this game and you're with him all the time and reporting on him, and clearly they're doing this in front of a receptive reporting audience, so they're not going to do it. But I mean, I just can't wait for this to happen. It has to happen eventually, right? He's going to say something is going to happen, and when's it going to happen? 2 weeks, and some reporter's just going to guffaw. What's so funny back there? What do you want to share it with the class? All right, 2 weeks. What's so funny about that? You say everything is coming in 2 weeks, and it'd be interesting to see whether any recognition on his face, like, I do always say that, or whether, I don't know what you're talking about. Torture that guy. Who knows what the reaction is going to be. And I mused briefly about this yesterday when I saw it. And first of all, I literally did LOL, and then start posting about it because it was hilarious to me. But I did wonder, you think, I know this is, and I knew this would be the answer that I would get from people. Well, no, it requires too much self-awareness for this to be the case. But do you think he ever, in blurting out answers, when's it going to happen, and he starts to say a number, well, 2, and he starts to tell people 2 weeks, and does he ever go, oh, God, I always say 2 weeks. That's going to give it away. I should come up with a different number. Why he never says 3 weeks? Like, he could do that, right? Or because it's so automatic with him, I thought eventually you'd hear him saying, it's going to be out in about 3 weeks. Or something, less. 1 week, 15 seconds. I don't know. But it could be any amount of time because it's all a lie. And 2 weeks is always it. But I don't think he, remembers that he does that all the time. And you can understand that. I mean, like if you have a tell, right? I don't know, whether it's formally as a poker player or anything else. If you have some kind of tick, some verbal crutch you lean on, I'm sure I've got them. I guess if I sat and thought about them, I would figure out what they were. But I don't know. I don't have a tell per se because I'm not a poker player. I'm not regularly lying on purpose like he is. But I imagine you wouldn't be aware of it if it was literally a tell like in poker, because otherwise you'd eliminate it because you start losing because of it. So maybe he's just not aware of it. And I think it would be hilarious for somebody to just laugh in his face about that and just say, do you know that you say everything is going to happen in 2 weeks? And not only that, but it never happens. But I mean, that's why it's so funny, is you're always saying things like, sir, are you aware that eventually the sun is going to burn out? It's going to expand into a red giant and go supernova and then collapse into a neutron star or whatever the hell. I don't know. What do they collapse into? Black hole. And, the scientists, they do say this, but it's going to be a very long time. It's not something for us to worry about. How long do you think it's going to take for something like this? This is a good chance he'll say, I don't know, 2 weeks. He doesn't know any period of time beyond that. Like, how long does it take to become a citizen? 2 weeks. How long does it take to, eat your way to the center of the earth? 2 weeks. How many licks does it take to get to the center of a lollipop, Tootsie Roll? Doesn't matter. He's not asking for a unit of time. 2 weeks. And if he does realize it's not a unit of time, everyone knows the answer is 3. He'll still say 2. 2 licks. I could do it in 2 licks. That's what's great about me. Anyway, this will affect nothing, and it may never come out. I don't know, but somebody gave him the card, so I guess they're able to print some. I don't know how many he's going to sell. I don't know whether he's going to sell any ever, and I don't know what's supposed to go with it. But now I'm intrigued to see did anybody write anything up about it? I doubt it, because it was just kind of dumb. But let me check the news for Trump Gold Card. There's some reporting on what he said on the plane. Not a widely popular subject here in the United States. Let's see. The Independent, the first hits, maybe Google is just distorting things. The Independent, UK paper. Newsweek, it's American, but the Times of India, I am a little curious about. The Times of India is, and the reliability scale, I find they love the sensationalism, but sometimes they get carried away with themselves. All right, there is an ABC News and a Washington Post article about it. Let me see what the Washington Post has to say just about it. President Donald Trump reveals $5 million gold card. April 3rd, President Donald Trump revealed the gold card, which would give wealthy individuals a path to U.S. citizenship. A path, anyway, for $5 million. And that's the extent of the reporting on it. There's a TikTok-style vertical video clip that looks to be about the same. I wonder if the sound is any better. Doesn't really matter. You've heard that one. Does ABC News at all look into? No, it's just everybody loves the video. That's where we are with this presidency. He says a dumb thing, they catch it on video, and then everybody's like, maybe it's a thing, maybe it's not. If it happens, we'll give you a report about it. So, path to citizenship. Not sure what that means, how long it takes. Well, now I know how long it takes to get your citizenship once you've paid your $5 million. 2 weeks, right? Anyway, golly, it just seemed awfully dumb, and I thought I would bring it up because it's Friday. It's fun to talk about things that are dumb. What's on everybody else's mind today? Well, let's see. I don't know. We'll go over to Pocket, where I've parked a number of things. While I'm making this transition, I have sitting in front of me some notes on some of you people. So I've been keeping tabs on you, or rather, you've been telling me to keep tabs on you. A couple of new donation support notes, including one new supporter, brand new, who wants to remain anonymous, but I can tell you we've had some more success with a program we've instituted here. It's not really a program. But did I make mention of this? A couple of you, maybe this is relevant to, hopefully tens of thousands of you who have been saying, I want to give possibly billions of dollars to support the Kagro in the Morning Show. The only thing is, I don't like PayPal or Patreon or any of the other things that we use. What do we use? Cash App. They're all criminals. I don't know. Whatever. Or I don't want to give away my information, or I'm just not that online. I don't like giving away my payment information to online apps that could accidentally be given to the editor of The Atlantic, something like that. And that's a legitimate concern. And maybe I have the most concerned audience in the world, and they're all holding back and want very badly to be able instead to donate directly by check. And I have not encouraged that behavior, mostly because when people say, well, let me send you a check, give me your address. I don't have a post office box somewhere that we can anonymously put. Otherwise, I'm giving out the home address, which is fine for the most part among the fans, but when somebody new comes along, hello, I am big fan. My name is Vladimir Vutin, and I want to help you. Give me your address. Not so sure I want to do it that way. But as it turns out, alert listener John Stafford, I think it was, John helped test this program and said, wake up. We're in an era where you don't need to mail anybody a check for anything. I know we have PayPal and Patreon and all that, and Venmo and yada yada for that. No. I mean, you can still write checks. You just don't have to mail them anywhere. And then it dawns on me oh yeah, right. That thing I never liked to use, the ability on my phone to use the banking app to take pictures of the check and deposit them that way. Ah, yes. Okay. So he said, that's all you really got to do. But, few tips. You want to take a picture of the check on a black background. It makes it that much easier for these scanning programs to pick up. And, he had another interesting tip, which was for the reverse of the check. Like, just you don't have to every time. You don't even have to do the thing, sign the checks anymore. You don't have to sign, which is so bad. How are they going to match the signatures? But usually, you endorse the check on the back, take a picture of the back, send that in too. But he's had a nice, cool stamp on available on his check that, you can just stamp him for online deposit only. And the banks, then they don't care whether you write anything or you scribble or you write Donald Trump on it, or you write nothing. Anyway, it makes it very easy, so you don't even have to download a picture of the check, and you can't print the picture of the check and then sign the picture and then take a picture of the signed picture and send that in because, I don't know, it produces all sorts of weirdness and the computers can pick it up and they don't like you printing off other people's checks. So none of that has to happen. So it's good news, and it enables people who are, who prefer to deliver that way and prefer to just do it the old-fashioned way, and you retain a little more control of things. Anyway, so that's out there. That helps. It's a way, and it works. So John contributed that way, and we were able to make it work. And our new anonymous donor has sent a nice contribution as well from out on the road, and it worked. I'm happy to report. And in the meantime, just additional news that let's see. Our one of our most interestingly named contributors, right? Did we mention Bill Barr? Yes, I think we did mention that he had moved over. He had adopted the Patreon platform after all. And let's see. I think also I don't know if I got this one on the air, but Larry Handlin, one of our faves, and for all of us on Blue Sky and elsewhere, Arch Pundit, kicking in an additional boost to his contribution, realizing, for the price of a soda, sure, right. Well, why not, reevaluate? Is it worth X amount to me a day? 10 cents a day, 20 cents a day? If it is worth 10 cents a day to you, what if it was worth 20? I can actually handle a contribution. What if it was 50 cents a day? It's a cheap show, Anyway, thanks once again to all of our loyal supporters. The fact that so many of you have signed up for recurring monthly contributions really, it makes it possible to continue to do this. Because if you were trying to round up those contributions, manually every time, it would drive you crazy and it would consume all the time spent bringing you the show, which is what I'm doing with that now. But we appreciate it. It's the only way we can keep these things going. And in the years to come, first of all, if we're keeping you sane at all, I'll probably be arrested for it. But if we're keeping it together for you, consider that in the inherent value in the show. I could tariff all of you and just take more money that way, but we're making it voluntary. But this is we got to see whether we can build to the point where this is a retirement income, essentially, because eventually they're going to push us all out of our jobs. And, if you need us to pipe up every morning to keep you sane, well, if there are two things that you need to get going in the morning, and one is a cup of coffee and the other is the Kagro in the Morning show, one, seek professional help, and we'll send you money for that. But two, consider that you are spending more on the coffee probably right now than you are spending on the show. And coffee as necessary as it is, if you could bring some sort of parity. I, like Donald Trump, think that there should be trade parity between every country bilaterally. And I think you should spend as much on the show daily as you spend on coffee. If it's instant stuff for you at home, 50 cents a cup, that's fine. You can get on board that way. And I think that probably runs about $10 monthly, We do about it's 20 plus shows, 22 shows maybe each day, every weekday morning. And over the course of the month, that's about 20 or so. And at 50 cents a cup, right, that's a $10 thing. If you're a Starbucks kind of person, where you're spending $4, $5, I don't know, or you're just getting the drip coffee, $3.50, I don't know, what's it costing? Or like me, when you go out for coffee, Sheets, and you get a $2 nitro. I just discovered this. I think they were offering it when we were pumping gas once. What the hell is this nitro thing? All the kids are drinking the nitro. And all right, for $2, they'll give you one. I'll have one for $2. $2 a show. It's kind of expensive. But whatever, if you're paying, or maybe half the price of the coffee. I'm going to adopt the Trump formula for tariffs. Whatever you're paying for coffee daily, cut it in half to be fair. And then to be really fair, send it to me. Why not? Okay, now I've wasted the first part of the show. Okay, it's time to move on to the news. It's a Friday. We're having some fun with it, but you really should send some money. We need it. And to the extent that we can build our monthly support level to something, approximating a bad job, that would be super helpful and convince us that one day, the rest of the production staff around the house can say, I can retire at some point. And we, whatever. This is something I could do this. Greg does it in retirement. I can do it too. I won't go away. I have many good years left unless I starve to death. That's the problem. Or get thrown in Guantanamo. And that opportunity comes this weekend with the April 5th protests happening all over the country. Let's all get arrested.
Hi, I'm Scott Anderson, the guy that writes the daily summary for this show, Kagro in the Morning. Thank you to everyone that supports this show. Many of you send donations through PayPal, Patreon, Square Cash, Radio Public, and so on. Some of you write your own essays and send them in, or read articles with your own commentary. We appreciate it. Now, some of you are listening to this and thinking, I'd like to help, but isn't there something I could do that wouldn't require money or effort? Why, yes, there is. You can just like us. On Daily Coast, they call it the recommend button. YouTube has a thumbs up. There are hearts and likes and love buttons. Tap our love button. Tap our love button every day. Share our shows and summaries on Facebook and Twitter, YouTube and iTunes, Stitcher and Amazon. Most of these places allow you to write a review, so a sentence or two would be great. Recommend us to social media, or tell your friends to listen to the show. You aren't just helping us, you're helping them find their new favorite thing to listen to. You could change the world. So thank you in advance from me and everybody else in the world.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Boy, you can see the difference between a Friday and any other day of the week when Greg is here. He keeps us disciplined, he does. It's time for us to move on to the actual news, really. Although one of the things I wanted to mention, I just, on the way out, I sort of hinted at something that's real news. April 5th, that's tomorrow, the hands-off movement protests kick off. I haven't been really tracking what's going on here, but it's another one of these weekends of, hundreds of events, hundreds of protest events. There have already been several such weekends, but I guess this is the first one. Most of the ones I've been watching have been centered around Tesla protests, but it's one and the same, sort of, at this point. But this one, a more obvious and direct protest of governmental policy in general. And they have websites galore to tell you where you might find such a protest near you to join in. And it was very easy to find, and I looked, and yep, there's one happening in the area. And, the time, location, all of that. Not a huge time commitment unless, of course, you end up in Guantanamo. But this may be your last chance to do a protest like this without seriously facing the possibility of being rounded up. Though you may also be, I guess, photographed while you're there. I don't know. But at any rate, the opportunity exists, and many people are taking it this weekend. And so they're very hyper local. If you look at the map, there's the dots are all over the country. You'll almost certainly find one in your neighborhood. If you've managed to make it to this show, you'll probably find one in your neighborhood. And, now it's time to give some consideration to showing up just to bolster numbers. You don't have to do anything fancy. A lot of people love to make signs. I like to make signs, but now the pressure is on. Like, people are making really good signs. I got to come up with something good. And as I was pondering it, talking about it with family who were going, saying, the problem is I don't have anything short to say about these guys. So it's difficult to fit it on a sign, but we'll try and be pithy about it. But who cares? You don't have a sign. You think you can't come up with a sign. And by the way, I should go over good sign making technique with everybody. I got some good background on that from the Freeway Blogger years and years ago. And I could see his lessons really need to be distributed, because sometimes people think about they're making signs, and some people put a lot of work into it. Sometimes people just wing it. It doesn't really matter so much. But one of the best practices that I recall from Freeway Blogger is if you get yourself a nice big piece of cardboard, you don't have to go out and buy poster board or anything. You can make your own, essentially. That he used to salvage packaging cardboard, big boxes from stores. He'd go out to the dumpster behind a Best Buy or something where they've unpacked a big screen TV, or behind the grocery store or whatever, any retail outlet. Usually they're getting rid of their cardboard, throwing it in the recycle bin or the garbage or whatever. And he would just take some large format cardboard, because he was making big signs. But it doesn't have to be that big if you're going to just hold it at a protest. But he would take it home and he would buy, cheap white interior paint, house paint, whatever's on sale. And he'd paint one side of the cardboard white. So now you have this bright white background. So the lettering on it really pops in a way that, people are normally buying poster board. But there's, so you can spend $1, $2, $3 on poster boards at the store when you could be salvaging it for, and maybe the cost of the paint. If you're just making one sign, it maybe doesn't make so much sense. But the Freeway Blogger was making hundreds. But you paint it white. And if you're worried about the lettering of it, sometimes people freehanding their lettering, they're not so crazy about it. We used to I still have an old-fashioned overhead projector, which I actually bought for this purpose many years ago when I was making impeach signs for George W. Bush, by the way. And I found a garage sale overhead projector, and I would print on my home printer on transparencies that I bought from, Staples, which is now closed, has now been killed by private equity people. In fact, Mitt Romney. Anyway, but you can buy the transparencies anywhere. I would say Amazon, but that giving money to Jeff Bezos. Anyway, but I'd print my message there, which was a simple one, impeach. But I would do it in Times New Roman font, which just there's a mental signal to people to see on the white background in big black bold letters in Times New Roman. Looks like it's official, not unserious like handwritten F. Elon signs, which they're good too. But so you could project that. I would hang up the big white piece of cardboard in the garage door inside and turn out the lights and turn on the projector and project the impeach wording onto the thing and trace it with a pencil, and then get a paintbrush and get black paint, and I just fill in the lines. So it comes out looking really neat and professional. Now, not everybody has access to even the garage sale projector, but probably plenty of people now have LCD projectors that they plug into their laptops. If you're a professional kind of person who gives presentations, that might be available to you. And you project that onto the cardboard. And of course, plenty of other options in the middle. But that seemed like an easy way of getting handmade lettering in an official font. Or if you want to protest in Comic Sans, you can do that as well. It's a good idea. And at a minimum, it's a great idea, I think, to grab free cardboard from someplace. And if you happen to have white or off-white paint around the house, that you use in the household, you can do that and paint your own giant poster board. And then you can do the freehand lettering or colors or whatever you were going to do, but you don't have to, go and buy poster board to do it and make a big to-do over it. You can just wing it. And you can go without a sign. It's important to show up and that there be volume of bodies at these things too, so they are less easy to ignore. The newspapers may or may not ignore this many things going on around the country. It's a story, right? They should cover it. But when people drive by, they'll say, what is this thing going on? Some of the people will get out of their cyber trucks and yell at you, I guess. But the more people that show up, the less likely that is to happen in a way that's really menacing and threatening, right? One person could stop the Cybertruck and jump out and yell at 50, but if there's 500 and they yell back, that's something different. Plus, of course, the chances that you'll be personally photographed and later be hassled about it are that much less when there's bigger numbers. So consider lending your presence to a demonstration like that and find it this weekend. And let's go look up. What's the, is the website just hands-off? Let's see. Take action. There's mobilize.us has got something. There's a hands-off National Day of Action, but lots of different people advertising these things, but I don't know what is the official site. At any rate, the one I'm looking at here is that maybe they use that just to do their organizing. Mobilize.us looks like, an event organizing platform. The hands-off, the big rally in D.C. going on at the Washington Monument from 12 to 3:30 tomorrow. And then you may find that there are others around you. But if you're looking for that, the hands-off with an exclamation point, hands-off rally, you can look locally and see if you can find one. Use the internets to try to figure that out. Okay? So, I also wanted to mention, so on Blue Sky, Greg Sargent posting a good point that I guess plays off of this and relates back to a point we made yesterday. I think Kevin Cruz had made mention of the fact that these tariffs, they're terrible. And if they're bothering you and you want to register a protest and you have the misfortune of being represented in Congress by a ruby red MAGA Trumper, and you think he's not going to care what I have to say, that may be true, but this is one of those issues that penetrates into the Republican mind. As Greg was telling us yesterday, it's bothering them because they know that they're vulnerable on it. They know that these tariffs suck for them politically, and they're worried. And over in the Senate, there were 4 Republican defections to actually help pass a Senate joint resolution to reject the tariffs on Canada. And you can take the same approach with these tariffs. I know we've fought the last war here. We've had the Senate agree, and that even though the House might never agree, to fight the war on the Canadian tariffs just in time to find out that everybody else in the world was going to have tariffs too. But you can take the same approach. And it's also worth noting that this whole thing these tariffs are supposed to be premised on the notion of some sort of emergency power. The president claims emergency powers to impose these tariffs unilaterally. And it's not even clear, what emergency he's talking about. When in Canada and Mexico, he's been using the false rhetoric of invasion or even fentanyl imports. But I don't know what the emergency is supposed to be with the rest of the country or the rest of the world. But whatever. He's declared it an emergency. And meanwhile, the emergency is so big that he took off a day early to go play golf and go to a golf tournament down at, so, not much of an emergency, really. You might have questions about that. And you could make a difference in protesting yes to your Republican representatives. They are nervous about it. Greg Sargent puts it this way: Dems should start with the premise that Republicans can be pressured to buck Trump on tariffs. Do not assume that it's hopeless. Hound them relentlessly. Republicans and Trump are hiking your prices to fund tax cuts for the rich, by the way. I know you know that already, but it's worth reminding yourself. Take it to red areas and yell at them. They do not like this. They will be very upset, and they will let the higher-ups know that they've got pressure on them and they want something done. And now, yes, there's also those of us who say, well, it's all part of the plan. He's going to impose all these tariffs, not any of which are necessary, and none of them actually do anything. And it's really, what he would call a negotiating tactic. Come and bribe me, and I'll undo the tariffs for whoever you are. That's as may be, but there's still the vulnerability for elected officials on this, and they do not like being having their feet held to the fire on this stuff. And to the extent that they're all hearing it, and when the complaint is economic, that makes sense to them, So anyway, I wanted to point that out too. Greg Sargent makes a good point about that. This is an issue where there's been cracks evident, and they got the requisite number of votes as a result in the Senate to make something sort of kind of happen. Can they do it in the House? They only need the same number of votes, so why not give it a shot? Ed Karatic, thank you very much for chiming in with a link here. He says that Mobilize has a map option so that people can look up local events. Most of these April 5th rallies are listed on this site. It is, again, mobilize.us. And let's see, what's the link that he gives me lead to? It's just straight up mobilize.us. And it's all the other, there's all kinds of organizations going on, but the top of the list, at least for me, it says closest events this week. So it's talking about me, where I am, but top of the list, top of the page is that hands-off mass mobilization. But I'm sure you can find out where it is near you. There's also the Tesla takedown stuff is up here. That's my second hit. And I guess if you give it permission to look at your location, it'll tell you what's going on soon, close to you. And there's a map function right up there at the top, the first one on the list. I'm going to click on that map, and I guess it'll tell me everything that's going on everywhere. But I suppose you have the opportunity to narrow your search for the kind of thing you're looking for. Anyway, so they have a very easy-to-use interface if you're looking for a way to participate in hands-off, or you want to do the Tesla one, or you want to do something that has to do with neither of these two things, but you're looking for some way to waste your time over the weekend, the way I'm doing it now. But you want to do it on your own when I'm not doing it for you tomorrow. All right. What else? Gosh, there's a lot. And why am I wasting so much time on this? Well, what's on my mind that I wanted to share with you? The tariff thing. Here's something new for you. As you know, we keep an economist at home. And so it was very handy for me. I took a look at something, how we were wondering yesterday, exactly how did they come up with these tariff rates? But the anecdotal evidence about it at the time was, hey, it really looks like all they're doing here is they're turning trade deficits measured in dollars into percentages, which is not something I've really ever seen done because it doesn't make any sense because, really any of these things, the measures don't make sense measured one country against the next because every country is of different size, strength of economy, per capita income, yada, yada, all sorts of things. But they would convert into a percentage, and then it was divide that percentage, whatever the percentage of deficit was, divide by 2, and that would be the tariff. So they were taking how much are we exporting to this country in dollar value, how much are we buying from this country in imports from that country, subtracting one from the other. So how much are we sending them minus how much are they sending us, divided by how much are they sending us. And that was supposed to be the percentage that was, that represented the trade deficit. Why turn it into a percentage? Apparently, it's the Trump economists' view, their rationalization for all this. And I don't know whether it's post hoc or what, but the rationalization for all this is, well, there's all sorts of reasons why there would be a trade imbalance, only part of which is tariffs up front. But there's all sorts of trade barriers countries erect in order to make it harder for other countries to sell their goods there, some of it more obvious than others. So we're going to capture the entire universe of interference with this percentage. Simply, how much are we selling to them? How much are they selling to us? What is the difference between the two? Turn that into a percentage, cut it in half to be fair, whatever that's supposed to mean, and boom, that's the tariff. Not sure why you're fair, but okay, and I'm not sure whether it is fair, it isn't. But why worry about being fair? I don't know. Anyway, mostly because it would be world-shattering if you really charged the percentage that you were talking about. But what they're saying is, whether it's tariffs or not, whatever it is that's preventing the other country from buying the same dollar amount of stuff from us that we buy from them is punishable by law. And we're going to do it with reciprocal. That's why it's going to call it reciprocal tariffs, even though it's not reciprocal. They're not putting a tariff on us. In some cases, they're just poor and can't buy very expensive finished goods from the United States, whereas we are buying large amounts of their raw materials because that's the business that they're able to sustain to participate in the world economy in some of these very poor countries. As it happens, the formula that they came up with imposes enormous burdens on the poorest countries in the world, who tend to be selling us raw materials, which tend to be bought in bulk, large amounts by commercial concerns. And how much can these very, very poor countries afford in terms of imports from the United States? Not much. Cheap consumer goods, possibly. Coca-Cola, Twinkies, whatever we can poison them with. It's not going to equal diamonds in the case of Lesotho, which is apparently on the top of the list for the one of the highest tariffs offered in this whole scheme. Lesotho imports almost nothing from us because they don't have a lot of, disposable income for importing things all the way down to South Africa. Whatever. And they don't have a great deal of disposable income to do it with on the individual level. But they are a diamond producer. And those are pricey. So yeah, there's a trade imbalance with them. Not because of tariffs or that they don't like America or they won't permit American Ford F-150s to be brought into the country. They just can't afford to buy that much of that stuff, but they're selling diamonds to us. So boom, 50% tariff for you because we have a trade deficit. There's no barrier in the way. That's not a tariff that's preventing us from selling money. That's poverty preventing us from selling expensive goods to them. So what do we do with the poverty? And remember, Trump thinks they pay these taxes. So we're going to make the poorest countries in the world pay the highest rates. Only they're not going to pay any of it because why would they export diamonds to the United States? I guess that, again, here, the simplistic Trump thinking is that everybody wants to be in the U.S. market. We're the biggest market there is. Nobody who's serious about doing business is going to ignore the American market. Everybody wants in, so we might as well capitalize on that. To some extent, true, but diamonds. Wow, where am I going to find another buyer for diamonds? Right? And they're not, I don't think they're like one of the top diamond players or whatever, but they make several $1 million, I'm sure, annually exporting these diamonds, maybe more, billions worth of diamonds could be going out. Take out the United States market. Where in the world are they interested in diamonds? Holy mackerel, that's not portable. We can't take that elsewhere and sell it. And I mean, although you might take a hit in the price by creating a temporary glut in the diamond market everywhere but the United States. But the United States, it's not it is, I guess, the biggest market, but it's not the whole thing. I think I saw somebody estimating something like 35% of world markets. It's huge, a huge chunk, but that leaves 65% of the world market left. That's also a huge chunk. And I don't know if you've heard, but Europe, Canada, for that matter, Mexico, everybody kind of into diamonds. I think they're going to be okay with the diamond market on that. So, it just basically there's a lot of edge cases where it just doesn't work out. Now, again, I guess if he's planning on dropping the tariffs eventually in exchange for a bribe, he might say, give me some of those diamonds and then I'll drop who knows where this is going. Anyway, as I was saying, they did say that they had a formula, and we were able to, see that we didn't figure out the formula. We saw that lots of other people were able to figure out the formula. And as it turns out, it worked every time. You look on the chart, what is the tariff and how does it relate to the trade deficit with that country divided by total imports from that country divided by 2. Every time the tariff that was being proposed on Trump's stupid chart matched that number. So they were certain that they had hit on the formula. As it turns out, the economists, sort of, over at the U.S. Trade Representative's office, the Office of the U.S. Trade Representative, USTR in the trade lingo, where people who know what trade means talk about that sort of thing, they put out a whole explainer and everything. So over at ustr.gov, you'll find reciprocal tariff calculations explained. There's an executive summary. It's only a one-pager, the whole thing. So amazing that they have an executive summary. Anyway, you could read the whole thing, and it's got a formula. And it's, mathy looking. The key formula they put out here is it's not a thing. They invented it, but basically, they have Greek letters in it. So lots of variables, and 2-3 of these variables are designated in Greek lettering. So that's supposed to make it look like impenetrable to you. You'll never be able to figure this out, but they try to explain what they're using. And then they're like, yeah, well, you got to know insider stuff to know what to do with these. And so the first one side of the equation, delta T, and they're using, I can't tell the difference between whether they're using Greek lettering for this, but or whether it's just italics. But the T that they're using looks like it could be a rendering of a tau, right? Did they say tau or tall? Tau. Anyway, the point is the difference in the tariff rates between us and country I. I don't know why country I, but it basically comes down to this. As they write it, the basic approach. Consider an environment in which the U.S. levies a tariff of rate TI on country I, and delta TI, difference in TI, reflects the change in the tariff rate. Let epsilon represent the elasticity of imports with respect to import prices. Let phi represent the pass-through from tariffs to import prices. So this is supposed to make you think, I can't do this, I'm not an economist. Let mi represent the total imports from country I. And by the way, why M is that lingo? I think it just stands for imports, because you're already using I for country I for whatever reason. Let M sub I guess, represent the total imports from country I, and let X, and it's not because, it's unknown, exports, imports. Let X sub I represent total exports. Then the decrease in imports due to a change in tariffs equals delta T sub I times epsilon times phi times M sub I, assuming that offsetting exchange rate and general equilibrium effects are small enough to be ignored, are they? The reciprocal tariff that results in a bilateral trade balance of 0 satisfies this equation. Stop for just a moment. Why should bilateral trade balances ever equal 0? They should not. But this assumes that that's a good thing, and it's in fact a very dumb thing and not necessary at all. But they then give you this fancy looking equation. Delta T, we'll say, sub I equals, what should be the tariff rate? It should be the exports from country I minus our imports from country I divided by epsilon times phi times imports from that country. Fancy. Now there's some explanation of, well, what are the values for epsilon and phi? To calculate reciprocal tariffs, import and export data from the U.S. Census Bureau for 2024, that's the information that's used. Parameter values for epsilon and phi were selected. The price elasticity of import demand, that's what epsilon stands for. Remember price elasticity from your econ course? The price elasticity of import demand was set at 4. Why? Recent evidence suggests that elasticity is near 2 in the long run, according to this study that's cited, Bohm et al. Of 2023. But estimates of the elasticity vary, and to be conservative, studies that find higher elasticities near 3 to 4 range, and these studies are all cited here, they were drawn on. So to be conservative, they used elasticity of, price elasticity of import demand 4. Okay, now what do we use for phi? Well, that's the elasticity of import prices with respect to tariffs. You know, I know, fancy lingo, etc. But whatever, they decided that current studies, recent experience with U.S. tariffs on China demonstrate that tariff pass-through to retail prices was low in the neighborhood of 0.25, 1/4, right? So, you know, of course, you know, economists could say, hey, that formula doesn't make any particular sense. You could argue with that. But let's say assume that it does make sense. What is really interesting here is, again, the formula that they come up with is exports minus imports over epsilon times phi times imports. Epsilon, you'll recall, they're using the conservative 4 times elasticity for the pass-through of 1/4. What's 4 times 1/4? Yeah, now you begin to see the problem. Hey, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. For those of you who checked out in the last segment, because like most of us, I was told there would be no math on the Kagro in the Morning Show, and you don't have to. It's not tough math. I told you all the delta, tau, this, that, and the other thing, phi, epsilon, makes it look like an economist is necessary to figure out what's going on, so that you check out and say, I don't get it. I disagree with the policy premise, but I don't understand the formula. Yes, you do. As it turns out, if you feel like you don't worry. Brendan Duke has you covered. Brendan is, I don't know. Let's go find out his Blue Sky profile. He is a fiscal policy wonk. That's what you want for something like this, right? Fiscal policy wonk at the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities, a former Biden-Harris White House National Economic Council member, a former Senate aide. So he's got the background to spot this. But I submit to you that so does your middle school algebra student. Because, again, the formula that they're offering us here comes down to exports minus imports. We can all do that, minus, right? Divided by fancy epsilon, 4, times fancy phi, 1/4. That's 25%, 1/4, times imports from this other country, which we already have from the top, the numerator of this equation. So exports minus imports, easy. That's the trade deficit divided by fancy stuff. Except fancy stuff, they had the opportunity to select whatever values they wanted for these things. They just happened to land on 4 for epsilon and 1/4. Now your middle schoolers are getting it for the phi value. Well, 4 times 1/4 equals 1. And anything times 1 is itself, as you know. So that cancels out. Your middle schoolers will understand that. The real formula, once you've selected your values for phi and epsilon, turns out to be exports minus imports over imports. That's the percentage that they say is due to trade barriers, although all it is it's how much of our trade deficit with this country, what percentage of our total trade with them is represented by the difference in the value of our trade, which is not a number that's really worth anything. But they're using it to capture what they say is non-tariff barriers to trade, but isn't. I mean, being poor is a barrier to trade, but it's not a tariff or structural barrier to trade. It's not intentional. They wish they had more money. They just don't. Anyway, because they could, it could be sort of arguably a legitimate formula. And honestly, as I consulted with the in-house economist, he was like, well, first of all, I hope nobody put their name on that. But the formula itself is not facially invalid. You could choose different values for these things, as they did point out. Long-term, at least one study says this elasticity number for epsilon is really about 2. But to be conservative, we went with other estimates which say that they're in the range of 3 to 4, and we went with the most conservative 4. Like, you could have gone with 3 and then stuck with 25% or 0.25 for the elasticity of import prices with respect to tariffs, whatever the hell that means. And then you'd have 3 over 4 times MI. As a matter of fact, now that I think about it, given that they ended up dividing the whole thing by 2 in the end anyway, like why not go with 2 so that you have 1/2 MI as the denominator in this? They didn't do that. They did it later in the second step. But you could have chose something else. But that what we're pointing out is if you were a legitimate economist, there's 2 possibilities for how they came up with this formula. One is it's a real formula, and then they chose these values, and they may or may not have done the math. But if you were an economist and you did the math and you were like working these things out, you would say, oh, actually, the choice of these 2 figures for epsilon and phi actually are extremely dumb looking, and I don't want to look dumb. Let's pick some other numbers. The better explanation for what would actually happen here is, as Brendan pointed out, incredible stuff, he says, in showing this and doing the math for you by substituting in the numbers for the variables. Incredible stuff. They wanted to make the thing seem more sophisticated than it is. So they threw in 2 Greek letters, but they selected values that cancel out. So it's still just trade deficit divided by imports. But it looks fantastic. It looks complicated. It looks like the sort of thing that 99% of Americans will say, I have no basis upon which to dispute this. I know nothing about economics. But again, all you need is middle school algebra. What's 4 times 1/4? It's 1. And if that's the only other element in the denominator, you don't need it. It doesn't belong there. You could have chosen different numbers and made it look legit, but you didn't even bother. I just found that kind of amazing. And that's what we're dealing with. That's what's in the White House. This is now from the U.S. Trade Representative's office. They're just making stuff up as they go along so that it looks like they did some work. They didn't. There's a whole New York Times article on it, and a couple of others, I think. How are Trump's tariff rates calculated? Writes for the New York Times, Tony Rahm, Anna Swanson, and Lazaro Gamio. And, it's not a long article, but I looked it over and, it doesn't say anything else, but you want to talk about sane washing this stuff, right? He said little about Trump did, the methodology behind those calculations, but a possible answer emerged later on Wednesday. Each country's new tariff rate appeared to be derived by, and this was before the USTR put out their paper. They just were able to wing it. They figured out the formula themselves because it was so obvious. Taking the trade deficit that America runs with that nation, dividing it by the exports that country sent to the United States. Then, because Mr. Trump said he was being kind and fair, right, the final tariff number was cut in half. Anyway, what can I tell you? It's pretty dopey. Let's see. James Surowiecki, the financial writer and book author, first pointed out the trend in a post on X. His comment set off widespread speculation, given that Trump previously said each nation's tariff rate would be the combined rate of all their tariffs, non-monetary barriers, and other forms of cheating, like being poor, I guess. Those non-monetary barriers include a host of hard-to-quantify laws and other policies that Mr. Trump sees as the primary reason that the U.S. experiences such trade imbalances in the first place. There are exceptions. Some nations face only a standard 10% minimum tariff starting this month. In an earlier briefing with reporters, White House officials said the figures were calculated by the Council of Economic Advisors using well-established methodologies. The official added that the model was based on the concept that the trade deficit that we have with any given country is the sum of all their unfair trade practices and cheating that country had done. But that's such a blunt instrument that it turns out basically saying some of those trade barriers are them not having enough money to buy anything from us. That's it. Well, I think that's well covered. I can now send you off to take a look at the USTR paper itself, the reporting on it, et cetera, et cetera. The Reuters headline on this thing, and I don't know that I'm going to be able to read you the article because they're now paywalled, but they point out in their headline, Trump's tariff formula confounds the world and punishes the poor. That's how you ended up with some of the poorest countries in the world. It's making it look like they're ripping us off, but they're not doing anything. They just can't afford any of the things, but they supply us with the raw materials we want and need, and at a good price, too, because they're poor. They're willing to take a nice lower world market price for their diamonds, their magnesium, whatever it may be. It's bizarre and upside down, and it's the indication that your formula isn't particularly good, that not even at the extremes, but at either end of the bell curve in terms of imports and exports from various countries, things just go wildly off the charts for people who are just not doing a great deal of business with the United States because they don't have to, they don't need to, they don't want to, they can't afford it, are the ones that are getting screwed hardest and all this, and they'll just stop exporting to the United States. And that also means that the big profits that he thinks he's going to generate from these tariffs aren't going to happen. But that too may never really have been part of the plan, since he plans to just drop these things for no good reason. All right, there's more. Let's see. Boy, what to fit in today's show. All right, just by way of follow-up, something Scott sent that I also spotted other people talking about today. Heading back to South Korea, the news is this New York Times article, a very long one, very involved one. We can't give you the time to read it all, but it might be something you want to look at over the weekend. The headline really says it all. Jubilation in South Korea after a president who declared martial law is ousted. And what do they mean by that? Finally ousted. Was he impeached? Yes, sure. Was that the end of it? No, because they went to court to try to prevent it. But the nation's top court unanimously upheld the impeachment of Yoon Suk-yeol, clearing the way, finally, for an election for a new president. So they're very happy about that. Their system worked. Congratulations to them. You want to read more about it and what's up in Seoul, and who is Yoon Suk-yeol, it says here in the next entry in the running commentary, and what is next for him. Very interesting. You know, he's got his face on flags in that country too. There's a great parallel between him and Trump, right down to how crazy they are and how easily they fall into YouTube conspiracy theory world, which I'll use as a jumping off point. to give you another bit of news from yesterday in the chaos of his departure for the weekend. How about this one? How do we open up the reporting of this? I'll start with the CNN reporting from yesterday, and I think they cover it pretty well. White House fires multiple administration officials after president meets with far-right activist Laura Loomer. Laura Loomer is back on the scene and having personal audiences with Donald Trump just before he takes off for the weekend in the middle of the national emergency that required collapsing the world economy, in order to tell him, I've found out that certain 4-star generals and the balance of the national security apparatus are all what I'll say disloyal to you, and you should fire them. And he says, yeah, sure, okay. Laura Loomer, 4-star generals, whatever. That's kind of where we are. The CNN reporting was the first one I saw on it. This is Katie Bo Lillis, Elena Treen, Kylie Atwood, and Caitlin Collins getting the byline on this piece. The White House has fired multiple administration officials. That's not shocking, including at least 4 National Security Council staffers. 3 sources familiar with the move told CNN. The firings came after Laura Cuckoo Loomer, right? Oh, there we go. Yes, she gets 3 cuckoos for this. Laura Loomer, not busy this time chaining herself to the headquarters of Twitter or whatever. But Laura Loomer, far-right activist who once claimed, they helpfully add, that 9/11 was an inside job, urged President Donald Trump during a Wednesday meeting. Oh, this happened on Wednesday. Okay, I thought it was Thursday on his way to the plane. Wednesday meeting to get rid of several members of his National Security Council staff, including his principal deputy national security advisor, claiming that they are disloyal. And she's the one who knows what loyalty is. One of the sources said Loomer had compiled a list of roughly a dozen names, and that the subsequent firings were a direct result of the meeting with Loomer, who was an influential voice around Trump during his 2024 campaign last fall. Susie Wiles, of course, finally managed to put a lid on it and keep her away from him. But you'll remember, I think last time we were discussing her at any length was she accompanied him on the plane to the debate. Was it the debate with Biden, or was it the debate that he eventually had with Harris? I can't remember which one. I think probably the Harris one. Anyway, and then, it's like everybody's worried who's the last voice he's going to hear before he hits the stage. Turned out to be Laura Loomer, and he went out there. That was the debate in which he said, they're eating the cats, they're eating the dogs. Fentanyl is killing everybody just when they look at it. It was one of his most bizarre pronouncements of a very bizarre debate. And then that was eventually the end of Laura Loomer getting close to Donald Trump. But now he's there. She's there again. Trump defended letting people go. It's just letting people go. I mean, I think the names that are involved in this report are staffers that you're just not going to generally know about. But apparently the circle expanded in some other reporting that I have handy, if this doesn't name it, to, Cyber Command 4-star Air Force generals. What? Trump defended letting people go when talking to reporters aboard Air Force One on Thursday. That's the free form thing. And here's a gold card. And also, don't talk to me about Signalgate. And I fired generals. Always, we're going to let go of people that we don't like, or people that we don't think can do the job, or people that may have loyalties to someone else, Trump said. But he said Loomer was not involved in Wednesday's firings, calling her a very good patriot. Well, if she wasn't involved in the firings, what in the effing F was she even doing in the White House? Anyway, all the other sources said, yeah, it was giving him a list of people to fire. And then that list of people got fired. So put 2 and 2 together. Put 2 and 2 multiplied by 1/2. Put it all together. The Trump administration also fired the director and deputy director of the National Security Agency, as it turns out. CNN reported late Thursday. Principal Deputy National Security Advisor Alex Wong, I don't know, was not among those who had been dismissed on Wednesday. However, one White House official speculated to CNN on Thursday that Wong could be out as soon as later that day, though a final decision had not been made because of how decisive a Mr. You're Fired is. Wong was one of the advisors specifically targeted by Loomer. So I guess she missed it on that one, unless he's been fired since. Who publicly questioned his loyalty to Trump and criticized him privately as a never-Trumper, but they're all over the place. One of the sources speculated that National Security Advisor Michael Waltz may have been reluctant to fire Wong, even though he's in no position to make any demands, because he had been embroiled in the controversy surrounding the leak of the controversial signal messages related to military strikes on Yemen that Waltz and his team have been under fire for initiating. And I guess, is that supposed to mean that Waltz was reluctant to fire Wong because if he did, then everyone would know he fired Wong because he had something to do with setting up the signal chat, and that would really just be Waltz saying, I'm going to fire other people for what I did? Anyway, the 4 officials fired include Brian Walsh. Don't know him. He's a director for intelligence and a former top staffer for now Secretary of State Marco Rubio when he was on the Senate Intelligence Committee. Also fired Thomas Boudry, Boodry, a senior director for legislative affairs who previously served as Waltz's legislative director when he was in Congress. And here's a fun one. David Feith, Feith. Yes, Douglas Feith's son. Remember Douglas Feith from the George W. Bush administration? I think somebody, hung the moniker on him of the dumbest MFer. And although he's credentialed as a very smart guy, Ivy League type, but I don't know. Maybe he had some dumb ideas. I believe about the Iraq War was the big reason that everybody kicked his name around. Well, anyway, his son David was, a senior director overseeing technology and national security who served in the State Department during the first Trump administration. And number 4 here, Maggie Doherty, senior director for international organizations. NSC, National Security Council, doesn't comment on personnel matters, says their spokesperson Brian Hughes. All of the officials who were fired went through the same vetting process in the last several months, which included questions about loyalty to Trump's agenda. They all were willing to say yes to that. That was run by the now director of the Presidential Personnel Office, Sergio Gore, G-O-R with no E on the end. I don't know if I've run into that guy's name before. Trump praised Loomer Thursday, saying that while she has recommended firing people in the past, yesterday she recommended some people for jobs. So, therefore, it's okay somehow. Well, sure, she comes in and says that she has lists of people that she wants to fire, but sometimes she wants people hired. Like herself, of course. She's a very strong person, and I saw her yesterday for a little while, and she makes recommendations of things and people, Trump said aboard Air Force One, and sometimes I listen to those recommendations. Like I do with everybody, I listen to everybody, and then I make a decision, which I really don't do. Loomer didn't offer details on the meeting, but said she'd continue reiterating the importance of strong vetting. Out of respect for President Trump and the privacy of the Oval Office, I'm going to decline on divulging any details about my Oval Office meeting with the president. Loomer told CNN earlier Thursday, it was an honor to meet with President Trump and present him with my findings. I did my own research. I will continue working hard to support his agenda, and I will continue reiterating the importance of strong vetting, like not letting her in the White House, for the sake of protecting the president and our national security. Whatever. The Oval Office meeting with Loomer, which was first reported by the New York Times, took place as the president and his economic team were preparing the tariff announcement in the Rose Garden, which was also garbage. Waltz had been in the Oval Office for other meetings when Loomer arrived for an audience with Trump and stayed as the president met with Loomer. So at least they weren't alone. It came as Waltz has faced increased criticism from Trump administration officials and those close to the president for creating the signal chain where sensitive information regarding an impending U.S. attack on Houthi rebels in Yemen was shared, while Trump has publicly said he's standing by Waltz and top White House officials insist he has no plans to fire him. Multiple sources familiar with behind-the-scenes conversations tell CNN that Trump is waiting to see how it all plays out because of how strongly strong he is. But that must have been awkward. I think Loomer probably wanted to recommend, you got to fire Mike Waltz right away, and everybody who's with him, too. So if he's sitting in the meeting, does she say it? And I guess the answer is no, because of how brave she is. Waltz traveled with Trump to Miami on Thursday ahead of the Live Golf tournament at the president's Doral club. Two sources familiar with his schedule said, including departing the White House with the president on Marine One. Susie Wiles, White House chief of staff, who was among the advisors who worked to control Loomer's access to Trump during the campaign, was present for the Wednesday meeting, sources familiar with the meeting said, which means, she knew about it and either thought she was okay with it or knew she couldn't prevent it, so she thought she'd limit the damage by sitting in. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, who was seen greeting Loomer before she left the White House campus, was in the meeting for part of it. Communications Director Stephen Chung and Vice President J.D. Vance also attended, sources said. GOP or GOP Representative Scott Perry of Pennsylvania, still not in jail, a fierce defender of Trump who was also present for the meeting. That sounds fun. He brought his own list of staff concerns to discuss with the president, one source told CNN. However, he was not initially scheduled to meet with the president alongside Loomer. Let me have all the crazy people at one time so that I can leave early. It was unclear when the Loomer meeting was placed on the schedule for those of you listening in the UK, but one aide said the presence of Wiles and Gore underscored that it was a sanctioned meeting, not just a walk-in, I guess. Gore, who is seen as one of the president's most loyal aides, I don't even know how you get that honor, has been among the advisors who has been fielding complaints from MAGA world about Waltz. This is not the first time that an activist has been linked to the firing of national security officials, underscoring the influence those voices in his head hold in Trump's second administration. Christopher Rufo, you all know that name because he's a jackass, an activist, published internal logs that showed staffers allegedly exchanging explicit messages on the National Security Agency chat rooms. Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard, within days, announced that she had fired people over those revelations. Rufo is known for amplifying false allegations that Haitian immigrants were eating residents' house pets in Ohio during the campaign by announcing a $5,000 bounty for evidence of the claims that it was happening in Springfield in a post on X that was viewed more than 4.6 million times and resulted in no information, of course. So, interesting. Rufo, I guess, is the origin of those. They're eating the cats, they're eating the dogs. But it was Loomer that he met with prior to declaring that during the debate, so they're clearly on the same page. After publication, Rufo said that I said the opposite, pointing to whatever. Who cares? He's lying about everything. That's not what we're here to talk about. Loomer, who ran twice for Congress unsuccessfully in Florida, which is amazing, has made a career out of courting controversy. Rising out of the radical right-wing online ecosystem, she has regularly tested the willingness of internet companies to enforce their terms of service. She once described herself as a proud Islamophobe and tweeted in 2018 that someone needs to create a non-Islamic form of Uber or Lyft because I never want to support another Islamic immigrant driver. What a nice lady. She was eventually banned from Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, now known as X. Loomer has told CNN last fall that she's not anti-Muslim. So there you go. Loomer, who once posted a video on social media claiming that the attack on the World Trade Center was an inside job, why is she so anti-Muslim then, appeared with Trump last fall when he mingled with firefighters to observe the anniversary of September 11th terrorist attacks. During the campaign, Loomer also often appeared at events where Trump was speaking, and her bombastic social media posts sometimes appeared to preview Trump's next line of attack. Some saw it as no coincidence that during his debate with then Vice President Kamala Harris, Trump talked about immigrants eating the pets of Ohioans, referencing that rumor circulated online, including by Loomer, who was seen deboarding Trump's private plane ahead of the debate. Loomer also said during the campaign that if Harris, who is half Indian, won, the White House will smell like curry and White House speeches will be facilitated via a call center. about as disgusting a person as you could possibly imagine being involved in anything. Yes. Oh, by the way, the reminder from Justice here that live, I think they do when they say it out loud, the live golf thing is actually Roman numerals for 54. That is the number of holes that they play in one of their tournaments, but also, as he puts it, the holes that Bonesaw Kingdom cut off of the regular PGA 72-hole tournament events. All right. So, yeah, I think we had realized that at one point, but okay. So Laura Loomer, back in the spotlight. When we come back, or maybe over the break, I'll sort of scan the, was it New York Times reporting on it, or maybe Washington Post. They had I guess sort of a sane-washed version of what happened there, but also the details of Washington Post on the 4-star general who found himself fired because the crazy lady showed up. Hi everybody, it's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and patreon.com, patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I'm your host, David Waldman, taking you through the last segment of this week's program, trying to prep you for the crazy weekend ahead and raise flags on things that will become probably bigger and badder news stories as the weekend progresses and as next week kicks off. That's the aim of the Friday shows. Let's see. So CNN's initial reporting on the crazy lady showing up at the White House and getting a bunch of National Security Agency people, National Security Council people fired, didn't include this morning's update that the National Security Agency chief was ousted. The guy who actually heads the NSA ended up getting fired in all of this. National Security Agency chief ousted after far-right activists urged his removal, reports the Washington Post. General Timothy Haugh, maybe? H-A-U-G-H, Howe, possibly, but Haugh, I don't know. I'd ask him. He's got time on his hands, but he probably won't take my call now. He was fired on Thursday during Trump's F-off to the golf place. Fired on Thursday as director of the powerful wiretapping and cyber espionage service, that's the NSA, according to U.S. officials. It's sad that some of these people are U.S. officials, but he's not anymore. Anyway, Ellen Nakashima, Warren P. Strobel, and Aaron Schaefer reporting for the Washington Post. Give it to you straight their way. The director of the National Security Agency, the powerful U.S. wiretapping and cyber espionage service, was fired Thursday. You know that. General Timothy Haugh, you know that, who also heads U.S. Cyber Command. Like, that's his Air Force posting. Well, he was let go, along with his civilian deputy at the NSA, Wendy Noble. According to these officials, like others in this report, they spoke on condition of anonymity to discuss personnel moves. And I just want to point out here, in the middle of firing various members of our own National Security Council, in the middle of the worst national security leak in, I don't know, decades, if not in history, the Signalgate thing, while we're conducting these military raids overseas, while we've turned the world upside down and made every country in the world, given every country in the world reason to be furious with us. We have fired the people who monitor all this stuff for us electronically, because nobody's speaking to one another electronically now anyway. So, another one of these crazy things that you can only imagine really being of interest to Vladimir Putin, more so than any American. But for some reason, Laura Loomer was into it also. So, yeah, sure. Fire the head of U.S. Cyber Command, because why command anything cyber? Fire the head of the National Security Agency and his deputy, because who needs national security? Far-right activist Laura Loomer advocated for the firings during a meeting with Trump on Wednesday, that she confirmed that to the Post on Thursday evening, in case you didn't believe CNN for some reason. In the meeting, Loomer, a fervent Trump supporter, and, rumors are something else, too, pressed for the dismissals of a number of officials besides Haw and Noble, in particular National Security Council staff, whose views she saw as disloyal to the president. At least 5 National Security Council aides were fired on Thursday. I think I only had 4. NSA Director Tim Haw and his deputy Wendy Noble have been disloyal to President Trump, Loomer said on Twitter on Friday. That is why they've been fired. Loomer told the Post that she urged Trump to dismiss Haw because he was, why? He was handpicked by General Mark Milley, who was, of course, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff in 2023 when whoever was nominated to lead Cyber Command and the NSA. As chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Milley would have had a role in helping select the nominee for Cyber Command, whose leader earns a 4th star upon confirmation. So it was a 4-star general, canned because Laura Loomer said so. Milley, who retired in 2023, had his security detail and security clearance revoked in January by Pete Hegseth over perceived disloyalty to Trump. Noble was reassigned to a job within the Pentagon's Office of the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence and Security. The NSA is part of the DoD. Haw, who assumed his dual position just over a year ago, was traveling on Thursday and could not be reached for comment. So he got fired while he was overseas. So much for Water's Edge, yada, yada. Sean Parnell, spokesperson for Hegseth, did not respond to requests for comment. Current and former officials said they were not aware of any official reason for Haw's dismissal or Noble's reassignment, just complaints from somebody who got in Trump's ear. The named, gotta use our sound effects. The named acting NSA director is Lieutenant General William J. Hartman, who was the Cyber Command deputy, one of the officials said. Sheila Thomas, who was the executive director at the NSA, was named acting deputy, according to 2 officials. So they did have somebody to move into that position, upon the firing. So I guess somebody's manning the phones at NSA. Haw last month hosted Trump advisor and U.S. Dodgy Service head Elon Musk at the NSA headquarters in Fort Meade, Maryland, Musk's first known visit to a U.S. intelligence agency. The visit went well, officials familiar with the engagement said. I guess Elon has no way of detecting who is loyal or disloyal to Trump. But I guess if the meeting went well, he considered that he was loyal. It was up to Laura Loomer to figure this out. Haw is a cyber professional with more than 30 years of military service, now fired, including as head of the Cyber Command's Cyber National Mission Force, which led offensive cyber military operations overseas, and as commander of the 16th Air Force in San Antonio. He ran Cyber Command's half of the Russia Small Group. Everybody loves having small groups. I hope it wasn't done on Signal. He led, he was Cyber Command representative for the Russia Small Group, a joint effort with the NSA to defend the 2018 midterm elections from Russian interference. good job on that one. That seemed to have gone well. The NSA portion was led by Ann Neuberger, who went on to serve in the Biden administration as Deputy National Security Advisor for Cyber and Emerging Technologies. During the election defense effort in 2018, Hall led offensive operations against Russian trolls. Aha! That's how he was disloyal to Trump. And launched initiatives to disclose publicly Russian spy agency malware and to conduct Hunt Forward. Those are missions to boot Russian intelligence from Eastern European government networks. Recall Jason Kitka, or Kikta, sorry, that's what it says. I would have thought Kitka, but Kikta, K-I-K-T-A, who was at the time lead defensive cyber operations planner for Cyber Command. So in other words, he rooted out Russian trolls. That's disloyal to Trump. His tenacity in countering Russian efforts was impressive to watch, said Kikta, who retired from the command in 2022. So why this administration would fire someone who is so innovative and aggressive is beyond me. It's not beyond you. You can see it. It's right in front of your face. Reaction from the Democratic leaders in the House and Senate Intelligence Committees was swift. Mark Warner of Virginia, ranking Democrat on Intelligence Committee, said Haw served with distinction. Here's a nice comment about him. Doesn't make much difference. But at a time when the United States is facing unprecedented cyber threats, as the Salt Typhoon cyber attack from China has so clearly underscored, how does firing him make Americans any safer? Well, it doesn't. I am deeply disturbed by the decision to remove Haw. Jim Himes of Connecticut, Warner's counterpart in the Senate, said in a statement, Himes described Haw as an honest and forthright leader who followed the law and put national security first. I fear those are precisely the qualities that could lead to his firing in this administration. And they did. No Republicans quoted in this. I don't know whether they even bothered or whether they just didn't get any response. Usually they note that there's no response from the Republicans on this. But I guess they just don't seem bothered by the whole thing. I don't know. Let's see. A couple of other things that we probably could spend some time on. For instance, back on the tariffs subject, because it is a big subject. I happened to see Aaron Fritchner on Blue Sky noting, let's see, he used to be, he's a House guy, as he says, was Deputy Chief of Staff to Don Beyer of Virginia in the House, frequent commenter on procedural issues. And Aaron was saying, Trump just opened up a procedural avenue for Dems to force votes on the tariffs that he announced yesterday. And he gives us what he says is a quick explainer. Note again that Greg told us yesterday that the Senate Dems actually found success in a measure that would undo the tariffs against Canada, at least. So what's the path? Is it different in any way on the rest of these tariffs? Each Trump tariff, he says, uses specific legal authorities. Sector-specific tariffs, like tariffs on steel and aluminum imports, they depend on the use of Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act. Tariffs on all imports from X country, that stuff, like he announced yesterday, they use the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. Yes, you can abbreviate it, IEEPA, and I guess they do that. I don't know what they say, IEPA. IEPA, andale, hija. Okay, well, anyway, IEPA, the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, is what these things are based on, and that requires a declaration of a national emergency. Trump's tariffs on nearly all imports from Canada, Mexico, and China were treated as one event, but in the actual text, they are all predicated on separate individual declarations of national emergency under the National Emergencies Act. Some screen grab here that, points that out and how they, physically laid out the allegations separately, one for Canada, Mexico, China. Important to remember, Aaron says, tariffs, of course, are taxes on imported goods. The Constitution gives total control over taxation and trade regulation to the president. No, to Congress. What? How is it that the president is doing this stuff unilaterally. Oh, and by the way, I just reminded myself of something that I started down that road. And, oh, yes, right. The very poignant reminder that, by the way, all of this stuff, this tariffs being taxes on imported goods, and it's going to raise the prices for all of us, right? Why all the revenue that's being generated for this is apparently slated in the Republicans' plans for reconciliation and for the budget next year. All of that revenue goes to offsetting the costs of tax cuts for the wealthiest, as always, when you're talking about Republican tax cuts. But I mean, that's basically just saying we're going to collect money from all of you and we're going to give it to them. Regular, like ordinary middle and working class people, we're going to pay the taxes on all these imports, going to collect all that money. Even though Trump thinks it's coming from the other countries, we know it's not. And even if it was literally, if it was actually being paid by the other countries, why would you give that to the wealthiest people in the country? Well, because he's a Republican and that's what they do. But that's worth keeping in mind. Aaron, though, was just saying, yes, tariffs are taxes on imported goods. And of course, because they're taxes, Constitution says Congress does that. Why isn't Congress doing it right now? The authorities that Trump is using are limited delegations of that power to the president that Congress passed in previous decades. He's clearly abusing them. I'm sure they didn't really reckon on a crazy-ass president looking for political union with Russia to own the globalists to have this power, but now he does. So Congress limited those presidential authorities in key ways. Trump used IEEPA for across-the-board tariffs on countries, which requires the declaration of a national emergency. And you all know what the emergency is, right? It's, Yeah, we don't know what the emergency is. That's he must have declared something to be the emergency. And I think fentanyl had something to do with it somehow. I don't know how. And of course, he keeps claiming it's a national emergency because immigration, illegal immigrants, that's the emergency. It's an invasion. So that explains Mexico, perhaps, but not any of the rest of it. Not Lesotho, it doesn't explain. What is going on here? Well, whatever the national emergency is, he doesn't seem to give a flying about it because he's off playing golf again, and a day early at that. Trump used the IEEPA to declare some kind of national emergency. Congress, however, gave itself the ability in IEEPA to terminate those emergencies with an expedited floor process. And here one of his earlier posts describes that. To exercise IEEPA tariff authorities, the president must first declare a national emergency under the National Emergencies Act. Totally different thing, but okay. But that National Emergencies Act, the NEA, not the National Education Association, but the National Emergencies Act, the NEA protected Congress's powers by creating a process to terminate a declaration of emergency in case the president is full of it, with fast-tracked floor consideration. You can find it in the code. 50 U.S. Code, Section 1622. There are a couple of screen grabs. The first is, what was that emergency? Well, on February 1st, Trump announced he was imposing tariffs on Canada, Mexico, and China, citing IEEPA and his underlying authority. Of course, whenever Trump says, my underlying authority, he's usually saying inherent powers of the presidency that I assume are mine. IEEPA may be used to deal with any unusual and extraordinary threat, and I guess any is the problem here, which has as its source in whole or in substantial part outside of the United States to the national security, foreign policy, or economy of the United States, if the president declares a national emergency under the National Emergencies Act, NEA. That's the interplay here. You can use IEEPA if you first declare an NEA national emergency with respect to that threat. IEEPA authorizes, I have no idea whether they really say it that way. IEEPA authorizes the president to regulate, quote unquote, regulate a variety of international economic transactions, including imports. Whether regulate includes the power to impose a tariff, I guess that's up in the air. And the scale and the scope of those tariffs, what scope might be authorized under the statute, open questions. Why? Because no president has ever previously used IEPA to impose tariffs. Oh, sanctions? Yes. Tariffs? No. Although IEPA has never previously been used to impose tariffs, in 1971, former president and noted upholder of the Constitution Richard M. Nixon used the similarly worded Trading with the Enemy Act of 1917, TWEA, as a matter of fact, upon which IEPA was based, to impose a 10% tariff on all imports into the United States in response to a monetary crisis. That would at least have some basis here. And then a long segment taken from, I don't know where, but I guess describing the powers. The termination review of national emergencies by Congress, the technical language on that, not later than 6 months after a national emergency is declared, and not later than the end of each 6-month period thereafter that such emergency continues. Each House of Congress shall meet to consider a vote on a joint resolution to determine whether that emergency shall be terminated. There's like an automatic opportunity every 6 months to do something about this. How do you do it? With a joint resolution. Referral to the congressional committees. This is all described. The joint resolution you need, the referral to the committees, the conference committee in the event of any disagreement between the houses, filing of the report. All that process is described here. A joint resolution to terminate a national emergency declared by the president shall be referred to the appropriate committee of the House of Representatives or the Senate, as the case may be. One such joint resolution, and by the way, it was a Senate joint resolution that Greg mentioned yesterday that they actually succeeded in passing to repeal those tariffs on Canada. They're using this procedure. That's what Aaron's telling us. Well, one such joint resolution shall be reported out by such committee together with its recommendations within 15 calendar days after the day on which such resolution is referred to the committee. So you can't bottle it up for too long. That's the expedited part. You can't sit on it. You don't have to wait for a discharge petition. You file the thing, and within 15 days, they got to move off they got to get off their asses and do something. Any joint resolution so reported shall become the pending business of the House in question. In the case of the Senate, the time for debate shall be equally divided between the proponents and the opponents, and shall be voted on within 3 calendar days after the day on which such resolution is reported, unless such House shall otherwise determine by the yeas and nays, a record vote. You can, by majority vote, do something different. Such a joint resolution passed by one House shall be referred to the appropriate committee in the other House, so that's what's going to happen to the Senate thing they passed the other day, and shall be reported out by such committee together with its recommendations within 15 calendar days of the day on which the resolution is referred to such committee, and shall thereupon become the pending business of the House, such House, whichever direction it's going, and shall be voted on within 3 calendar days of the day on which such resolution is reported, unless such House shall otherwise determine by yeas and nays. So you can see yes and no in this. Now the House is going to be handed this thing. When they refer it to committee, the committee has 15 days to report on it, make some kind of recommendation, and then within 3 days of the reporting from the committee, the House has to vote. Unless the House votes not to vote, which means that they can do the same thing that they just did to Anna Paulina Luna if they want to. If they can hold their coalition together, then they can vote to do something else, to not consider the thing, to kill the resolution before it actually comes to the floor, or to take their time with it, slow walk it, whatever they're going to do. But that goes to Greg Sargent's point from earlier in the show. The Republicans are unhappy at having to defend tariffs generally. That's supposed to be something they oppose generally. And it is hurting their constituents, and they know it generally. And they are beginning to defect, as we see in the Senate. That's why it is important to call your Republican representatives, even if you think they won't listen to you, because it's only going to take 4 or 5 of them in order to defeat any effort to Anna Paulina Luna bottle this thing back up again and prevent the vote from taking place. It is possible that these tariffs could be dumped by Congress. But let me point out, maybe Aaron gets to it later on, the form that is prescribed here is a joint resolution. And joint resolutions, well, they have effect because they have the power of law, even though they're not styled as bills. But why do they have that power of law? Because a joint resolution, once accepted by both houses of Congress, goes to the president, who can sign it or veto it. So, yeah, you might be able to get those 4 Republicans to defect in each house. But then if Trump vetoes it and sends it back, well, now you really have an uphill climb. But that's just a building of pressure. Republicans do know that this thing sucks. And if it looks like, since they're the ones who are going to stand for election first, assuming we have them, in 2026, do they want to buck the president on a veto for a signature issue? Probably not. But that just means that as the disaster develops, that's what's going to be held over Republican heads. Aaron continues by pointing out, when Trump activated his tariffs on Canada a month ago, Democrats in both chambers quickly filed resolutions to terminate the emergency declaration that he used to do it. Again, this gets fast-tracked votes in both chambers. That's what the Senate did the other day with 4 Republican crossover votes. But Republicans snuck a provision to disarm this privilege in the House into the CR rule last month and passed it. So they've actually already taken the majority vote that it takes to derail the thing over in the House. So the Senate passed resolution doesn't have the same privilege in the House. But note, this does not kill it. A vote can still be forced via, unfortunately, discharge petition, which they have just figured out finally how to disarm, even if it happens to become successful. So, they got that. There is more here from Aaron, who says Republicans snuck a measure, of course. He's reminding everybody that he talked about this a month ago. Snuck a measure into that essentially turns the clock off in the vote on the rule for the government funding bill, the CR. Let's not have a shutdown. The rule says now there's a procedural vote to bring, now it says you can derail the privilege of what the Senate has passed and sent over to the House. Privilege for these anti-tariff resolutions works by requiring votes within a fixed number of legislative days. Republicans disarmed that mechanism in the House by suspending the legislative clock for resolutions targeting Trump's national emergencies, which were declared on February 1st. Here it is in the rule for the CR. Each day for the remainder of the first session of the 119th Congress, that's what we're in now, shall not constitute a calendar day for purposes of Section 202 of the National Emergencies Act with respect to a joint resolution terminating a national emergency declared by the President on February 1st, 2025. You see how specific it's gotten? The rule for the CR says, as far as the House is concerned, if you're counting the number of days it's been since the declaration of an emergency by the President, it doesn't count. I mean, we're not counting days. Each day for the remainder of this session, that is till the end of December when they break for holidays, that'll be the end of the first session of the Congress. Each day, for purposes of counting off the passage of time since the declaration of the emergency, there's no such thing as the passage of days anymore. Everything else, days pass, but not for that thing. But the tariffs that Trump imposed yesterday on nearly every country in the world, that necessitated a new declaration of national emergency dated April 2nd. So they could try and do it all over again, but as he says, Republicans' jiggery pokery with the calendar will not apply because this is a new resolution and a new declaration of emergency. A new resolution to terminate this emergency now has privilege currently in both chambers. Again, stay tuned. They could try and undo it again, and they could do it with exactly the same mechanism. But now I guess we're supposed to be on alert to that. The hard part, if Democrats pursue this thing, and he says, I repeat, stay tuned, Republicans will try to disarm it again. Last time the public didn't hear about it because the Republicans snuck it into a procedural vote while the press was fixated on the CR itself. This time, people like us need to know the stakes of that vote when it comes. So next time a rule comes up in the House, you got to be looking for that. We'll see whether it works. Again, he says stay tuned, and then he includes something from the House Foreign Affairs Committee Democrats that say Ranking Member Meeks today announced plans to introduce a discharge petition to force a vote on terminating the president's tariffs on Canada. This is their attempt to get around the suspension of the calendar, but interplay. Thanks to Greg for bringing this up earlier in the week. We also now know that even if they succeed in a discharge petition, they have another rules-based magical moment in which they can suspend all time and space, only with respect to this one thing which seems to be bothering them. So it's procedural trickery, but, as we've explained in numerous situations over numerous years in explaining House procedure and Senate procedure, that's the sort of magic they can do. They have magic wands that they can wave and say time freezes, but only with respect to this thing, because freezing time generally otherwise creates all sorts of cascading issues later on, right? So, okay, only time with respect to the counting of days after the declaration of this emergency. Well, now he's declared a new emergency. We have to do this whole stupid thing over again. All right, well, stop ceding your powers to the president, Congress. You were not supposed to do that. The founders, the writers of the Federalist Papers, thought that you would jealously guard your prerogatives, but apparently you have not. All right, time to wrap it up. That leaves many, many things unsaid, of course, but one, we'll be back on Monday to say more of these things. Two, Justice Putnam takes a turn at the microphone next with the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and he'll have his take on the top stories of the day. Oh, let me just add this. Ed Martin, who is up, he's currently the, I forget, not acting, but they use a different term for him, D.C. U.S. Attorney, apparently being nominated permanently to the position and is having hearings. Dems are demanding hearings for his nomination, which apparently is an unusual thing to do for U.S. attorneys. They don't often do that, and that's because they know he's a wackadoodle. Anyway, as we said, Justice Putnam takes things next, and here's what he's got on tap. A Senate hearing devolved into chaos after Cancun Ted Cruz repeatedly spoke over Amy Klobuchar and then walked out as the pair exchanged barbs over nationwide injunctions inhibiting Trump's agenda.
You have been listening to Kagro in the morning with David Waldman.
I guess she must obviously know that most of those nationwide injunctions came out of Texas, and that's where he's from, and so he had to, I guess, attack her personally and scream at her in order to cover up for that. Well, there's that and much more from around the country and around the world coming up next. Do stay tuned for that summary, and we will see you on